Good morning, this is Faith at Faith and Books. I just woke up. I'm running a little late this morning, but it's dark out, it's raining, and you can probably hear the sound of the water, the stream, and the pond. There's got like a drainage thing in the pond that makes noise when it rains a lot. Anyway, but it's kind of warm out, so that's nice. It hasn't been that warm today, this week. Anyway, I hope everyone's well, and I'm just going to do a review of this book. Can you see it? The Daughter of Time by Josephine Tay. That was a pen name. It's Elizabeth McCassick or something like that. I can't remember her actual name. And this is a pretty well-known book. It's considered a mystery classic, and I thought I had read it. So back before my father died in 2004, I borrowed it, and I even have evidence of this because there's his name and phone number there in my sister's handwriting. My sister had moved in with him to take care of him because he suffered a number of strokes. Anyway, so he lent it to me, and I thought I had read it, but I think I'd only started it because only the first part was familiar. And so I really wanted to like it, and it's okay, but there were a lot of things about it that annoyed me. So just a quick summary of it. It's about this Scotland Yard detective named Inspector Grant has had an accident. He's fallen through a trapdoor and broken his leg and concussed his back. He's surprisingly not in much pain. He seems to be very clear-headed. I don't think he ever complains of pain. He complains of boredom. And so he's stuck in a hospital. This was before the days of even telephones in the room. So it's very much like a play. So to me it was a little bit claustrophobic. Maybe she meant it that way, but I was doing a little reading on it, and she had actually written a play on this same topic before she wrote the book. But the play never went off because it was too confusing. But I found this book confusing. So the review I read, and I'll try to link to it. It was a New York Times review, I think. Quite a long column on this book. I found it confusing. If you're not really steeped in the history of the War of the Roses, and if you get your Edwards and Henrys mixed up, I felt like there could have been more background given, but because it's so play-like, it's all done in conversation. So this man is stuck in his hotel room, and the only people he's got visiting him are these two nurses, his day nurse and his night nurse. The matron of the hospital visits. Very rarely somebody from work comes to visit, and then he has a friend named Marta who is a stage actress. And she has a young friend who is the historical researcher at the British Museum. So those are the people, those are the characters. And they come in and out of this hospital room. And it's all dialogue. You learn about everything through dialogue. Or he'll have read something in a book that somebody's lent him. So you learn something through that. But the mystery is, it's Inspector Grant taking his police-like, approach to solving a murder mystery and applying it to the question of whether Richard III really murdered the two young princes in the tower. So that was the end. Richard III was the end of the Plantagenets, and Henry VII, the first Tudor, came in and had a very attenuated claim on the throne, and there was a war, and then Richard III dies in battle, saying, my horse, my kingdom for a horse, and then that was the beginning of the Tudors, and so this is a whole exploration of whether Richard III really murdered those two princes, and Josephine Tay, or Elizabeth, whatever her last name was, really was in Richard III's camp, that he didn't do it, and that he had been maligned by Henry VII. And she goes to great lengths to explain her position on it, her very passionate position on it. And So there were just things about the book. It just, for one thing, I have to say, and I know that in booktube worlds, many people really love learning about British history, and it is interesting. But I have this basic prejudice where I just don't like monarchies, because this is the kind of treachery and civil war and brutality and, family infighting, patricides and fratricides and whatever it is you call when you murder your nephews. It inspires that sort of behavior. And I hate classes, like I don't like the royalty and the landed gentry and all that, as much as I like, Jane Austen and Georgette Hare and that sort of thing. It's just for the plot setup. It's not, it's for the social commentary. I have never been particularly, enamored of the idea of royalty and this strict class breakdown of society where you have the haves and the have not. So and this gets so into that fighting and who had the claim to the throne and everything, that my underlying bias got my impatience with the whole concept of it got woken up, and I just it annoys me that that's what people reverted to, and then people kind of romanticize it. Anyway, if that makes sense. So it became something that as I read, I started to lose interest. Also, there were so many little things that annoyed me. Everybody in the book, Inspector Grant, his assistant Brent Carradine, everybody spoke the same way. They have the same turn of phrase, the same sense of humor, the same sort of snooty, sardonic way of saying things. And I couldn't tell them apart. I couldn't tell who was talking because they all talked alike. Even Brent Carradine was supposed to be American, and she awkwardly sticks in a couple of more American sounding phrases, but no, he says things just like any British person would say. So that was confusing. I couldn't tell who was talking. I didn't like the characters. They were so snooty. They liked to call people names, like the nurses were called the Amazon because she was tall, and the midget because she was short. Marta calls Brent at first her woolly lamb. That's her nickname for him. Everybody had sort of these off-putting nicknames that were supposed to be clever, but to me, they just sounded really snooty. Like, just call the woman by her name. I don't know how many times in the book they called Thomas More, who wrote a history about Richard III, very pro Henry VII, because of course he was under the Tudors, and I guess he was kissing up to the Tudors, and much good it did him. But so he writes one very pro Henry VII story of how the two boys went missing. And so they're forever calling him the Sainted Moor. I mean, it was funny the first 10, 15 times. The 30th time, it got really, really old. Another thing that was really strange about it that made me not trust the inspector right from the beginning was that he relies so much on his instinct for looking at someone's face and being able to tell whether he's guilty or not, or what kind of character he has. So, everyone can do that to a little bit of an extent, but he's doing it from a painting, a 400-year-old painting or something of Richard III. And that would have been okay if it was just sort of mentioned or, in the background, but she just keeps coming back to the fact that he's looking at this portrait. The whole time he's got this portrait of Richard III by his hospital bed that he's looking at. And that's the thing that's kind of driving him to do more research about why he might be innocent. So that just seemed a little weird to me. Also, it's a portrait. It's not like a photo, like a candid photo, right? It's a portrait, very stylized from long ago, through an artist interpretation, who's probably trying to make the king look good, right? Because they would often try to make the royal look better than they actually did. But the other annoying thing was just really the publisher's fault. So this is the picture on the cover, right? That's Richard III. There's somebody's feet down there. Somebody's dead. I guess that's why they picked it. This is not the picture that they talk about all the time in the book. It's a different portrait of him. Why would the publisher put the wrong picture up there if the picture's so important? It's like they didn't read the book. It made me think of when I read Romola. Is that how you say it? Romola? Throughout the book, they talk, by George Eliot, throughout the book, they talk about her having golden hair. And the picture on the cover shows this beautiful woman with black hair. It's like the publisher did not read the book. And that's what I feel like here. In the portrait that they're referring to in the book, they describe him taking off a ring. He's in the middle of taking off a ring as he sits for the portrait. And that's the face that he was studying so much. And he asked everybody, his doctor that comes in, the nurses, what everyone thinks about this face as proof that he must be innocent. It was weird. But it's weird that they put the wrong picture up there. I found that really annoying too. So what else didn't I like about it? Everyone was snooty. You could sort of see right from the beginning that they were going to prove that in their minds, that Henry VII had done it instead of Richard III. I got really confused with my history and all these characters. I could have really used a little more background about each one. They just kept popping up. The repeated sainted more over and over and over again. But also it's sort of meta in that, and I don't know that she meant this so there's actually societies in England that are advocating for a reform of Richard III's name because they think that the Tudors really maligned his reputation in order to undergird their own legitimacy for taking the throne. And so she has them investigate history, but they start saying things. First of all, it's still an open, like historians still are open about it. To a historian, it seems it's a mystery because there's proof either way, and they don't know. They don't have evidence. There is some evidence that Richard III might not have done it, and some people side that way, and other people say no, there's evidence he did do it, and they side that way. So it's a question. It's a mystery. It's starting to rain harder. But so she's kind of playing with history herself. She's sort of cherry picking herself, and yet that's the big thing is that they're saying that history, basically, the author's saying that history is written by the victors, and therefore you can't always trust it, and that historians tend to just repeat what they've been told. And I guess some historians do, especially textbooks. Will have errors in them for a long time, and then. I don't know, it's almost like a version of fake news, where you just get one story that was told by really biased people, and then the other people who don't agree with it or see it from a different perspective cry fake news, and that's sort of what this is about. But she does it herself. Like there's one instance where, and I looked this up, where his cousin, Laura, who speaks exactly like him, writes him a letter, and mentions the Covenanters in Scotland where they had these two women who were considered martyrs, but it turns out they weren't martyred. So I went and looked that up. And, historians again say, well, there is evidence that they were martyred, but then, this one person said that they weren't. So she is playing with history herself. I found her untrustworthy as well. Her perspective was untrustworthy, and yet the whole premise of this is that other people are untrustworthy, other historians are untrustworthy. So it was kind of meta in that way, in that it was kind of deconstructing how we write history. So it was interesting. It was well written in a sense that she's very clever and has a good, turn of phrase that she tends to repeat way too much. I thought that to an annoying degree. I just didn't find myself, and because of my own prejudice, I think I just didn't find it very gripping, and I sort of had to struggle to finish it. I just didn't care. I knew from the get-go what the premise was going to be, and I found myself not caring all that much about the conclusion. So I'm a little disappointed. I thought I was going to read this, well-reputed mystery and really enjoy it and be part of the club that really likes Josephine Tey, and I was disappointed. Anyway, that's it for me. I think I'm going to try and get this up. I'm running late this morning. Oh, and I've already talked for 16 minutes, so I hope I can get this up. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, and I will talk to you later.